So when it comes to the general retail trends, if you are in a good location and there is good co-tenancy, so there is different businesses that would support one another and it's a good mix to drive foot traffic, it's still going to make sense to develop retail in the future as well as the need now.
Hey, what's going on, everybody? Welcome back to the Land Development Podcast. I'm your host, Ryan Glick. If this is your first time joining us, each week when you tune in, you'll hear one of two different types of shows. Sometimes when you tune in, you're going to hear industry news. That's where we pull up a few different headlines and we talk about what it means for the land development industry. And then other times when you tune in, you're going to hear an interview style show where we have on someone associated with the land development industry and we dig into some topics that are of interest to them. Now, today we have an interview style show, of course, as you can tell from the title, and I'm excited to have with me Jumha Shatara, who is the founder of Skyrise CRE and a commercial real estate broker based out of the Indianapolis area. Jumha, thanks for joining me.
Ryan, I appreciate it.
Yeah, and I always start out just digging into the background of my guests on the show because I think it's interesting for people listening in. We have people tune into the show who are at all levels, right? You have some people who are, they're noobs in the industry. They're just getting their feet wet. They're trying to learn. And you've got people who are seasoned vets. And so I guess, can you walk us through your background, how you decided to get into real estate?
Yeah, absolutely. So started in 2012. Was a director of marketing for a very small mortgage company for residential real estate. And the owner abruptly left and, trying to figure out, like, do I still want to stay in this industry? What am I going to do here? But one of the realtors that was in the office suggested property management. So got into that, actually went to my job fair for IPY where I went to college and met some young guys, a company out of Chicago called Pangea Real Estate. And these guys were kind of pioneers in the sense of they were coming to Indianapolis in, I think, 2010 to buy a multifamily. These guys had a ton of cash, very large company, I think 220 employees when I was there. And again, it was just run by kids. Again, I was 25 years old at the time. So kind of liked their energy and then got into that. So these guys were buying properties, again, what we call value add real estate. But it was that they were buying properties that were 10% occupied or in, pretty rough shape as far as construction is concerned. But, the reason why I didn't blow out of that, within a week, these guys were very structured on how they facilitated construction, project management, and the financials. So I was really drawn into that aspect, getting ready for HUD financing or insurance audits, getting leasing where it needed to be, collections where it needed to be. So that was 2012, 2013. Got licensed closer to 2014 for residential. Did a handful of residential renovation flips and really wanted to get the taste of the financials back. So going to dabble in 2020 in commercial real estate and then went full time in 2022. And that brings me to today.
All right. So you are right now, I guess today with what your company does, are you 100% commercial real estate? Is that where your focus is?
100% commercial.
Okay.
Yes.
And so in your past, obviously the residential experience, the multifamily experience, is there anything from that time that has kind of fed into what you do on the commercial side? Any lessons learned or anything?
Yeah, absolutely. And it's more so the organization and working with construction crews. So actually where I had a lot of fun working with the construction manager of the whole company where he would come in and all the external crews for our turn. So the apartments that was really, needed a lot of work. So maybe they were full guts. They were doing, exteriors to that particular unit or townhome or apartment and just figuring out how am I going to lease this up in a certain amount of period of time then also working with our maintenance managers doing the internal unit turns. So making sure they're turning those in X amount of time to making sure we're meeting our leasing goals, our collection goals. And then that cascaded into how I work with construction managers today with my construction turns. So, right now we're doing a close to 3,000 square foot Class A office build out, and it's blank space right now. It's empty shell. These guys are tech companies, so they want it to be ultra modern, exposed ceilings. And because I have that experience and background early on when I was even running my residential flips, not knowing, how exactly everything works, I have that frame of reference. So it did influence me on how I work with construction today and just generally being a better broker.
Yeah, something I was just thinking about. So yesterday I was talking with a local residential real estate agent here, and we were just kind of talking about the industry in general. And on the residential side, there's a ton of agents, right? And so
Of course.
you have people doing it just on the side and whatnot. But with that, you don't. I mean, I guess what we were talking about was that on the residential side, you don't necessarily. You just have to provide good service, have good communication, because most don't do that. And so
Yes.
that alone makes you stand out. Do you see the same thing on the commercial side, or is the commercial side you can't even really get in the game if you don't already have that as your base level?
Yeah, that's a good point to bring up. The communication piece with your clientele or even the brokerage community in general, because no man or woman's an island in this industry. You have to be dialed into knowing what is going on with leasing rates and what things are trading for. Indiana's a non-disclosure state, so not every single sales price is going to be, open knowledge. But when it comes to the client relationship, communications, 101, right? But what else are you bringing to the table that is going to make you stand out? Even though we are much a smaller pool, I know you mentioned residential brokers, so I think probably in Indiana there's 8 to 10,000 plus off the top of my head that are licensed. I would say it's probably a few hundred that are in commercial real estate. And when I look at, other people in the industry that makes them stand out, whether it's clientele, rapport that they built up a number of years, the landlords that they work with, but me being more centered in a buyer rep and a tenant rep role, my business does come from, past clients and, having those wins accumulate over the number of years I've been a wholly in commercial real estate. It's that reputation and also these different stakeholders I can bring to the table. So I think communication is key, but you also got to bring other tools to make your clients succeed.
Yeah, what is it about the Indianapolis market that has you doing business there?
So I grew up in Carmel, but I would say Indianapolis and the greater Indiana market, it's still growing. So that's another reason why I like it. I see ourselves as a small Nashville. So when you look at multifamily starts, typically we are, trailing a Nashville, and just how our downtown was built, it's very wide. So we have what's called 465 that loops around our city, and that takes about 15 minutes or so to get to our downtown corridor. So we always have room to expand, and that's just also great from my perspective being a broker. There is so much development both on the retail side and the multifamily side. For example, population growth, demographic trends, high household income that allow me to work with a multitude of business owners in whatever level that they're in. Of course, I love to work with the guys that do have multiple units. If it's a high-end nail salon or a restaurant, that allows me to find them new places to expand. And Indianapolis it's a great place to do that and also build yourself a reputation.
This episode of the Land Development Podcast is brought to you by Groove. Search parcels, view ownership information, and track conversations with landowners all in one simple platform. Start your free trial today at letsgroove.com/signup. That's letsgroov.com/signup. All right, let's get back to the show. How's the downtown market there? Is it pretty competitive? Is there a lot of activity going on down there?
Yeah, so the office market is still struggling a little bit, but there's been quite a few moves made by some large property owners in the recent, I would say, 3 to 4 years that they're trying to turn around some of these, office buildings. We've actually had a very successful office to residential conversion by one of the bigger developers here in the city. And this is probably one of the highest priced apartment buildings probably in the state, closer to $3 to $4 a foot in rental rate. And it's just really a testament of one, this said developer, very, very successful. But two, they are trying to revitalize parts of downtown. We have, for instance, Mass Ave and Bottle Works. This was an old Coca-Cola plant, and it was built up into a close to $400 million development. And if you want retail space, it's one of the highly most sought after spaces is because of how they built it out in very walkable environment. So Indianapolis is coming around. It will continue to do so just because of how the opportunities that are arising for some of these developers.
Yeah, being an Iowa guy, I'm always fascinated by how, different things that might draw more business in, especially into real estate. And obviously with Caitlin Clark going to the Indiana Fever
Sure.
and everything there, I always think about what the Caitlin Clark effect is like on businesses maybe wanting to locate near the stadium. Now, this season hasn't been the best because she's missed a lot of games. So maybe it's not so much happening right now. But is that something you see at all where people are more, you're seeing more people want to be around down there, whereas in the past when the attendance was a lot lower than it wasn't as big of a draw?
Yeah, so there's two parts to that. One, they have had an effect. I believe, there are more people going downtown and some of these corridors being built back up. And then also, the Pacers going to the finals this year as well. That has drawn a lot more people downtown in this recent year. But when we're looking to the future, we have the Indiana Convention Center, which is a top 20 convention center across the country. So we can host, I believe, out of the 250 biggest events, we can host 80% plus of those for nationwide. We have the the NFL Combine here that is a huge draw as well. And then when you talk about some of the more 10-year horizon developments, our mall, Circle City Mall, was recently bought out by the same developers that did that Mass Ave Bottle Works development. And they are going to basically take sections of the mall and make them outside. What does that look like? So maybe some of your listeners are familiar with City Walk in West Palm Beach. This is an open corridor, mixed use kind of mall, if you will, where the first floor is retail, and then I believe they have office on the second floor, but then there's residential on top. And this is walkable open air. They are going to do this and really provide additional corridors for people to walk. So like different streets that there won't be cars on, and that will be very exciting. It's probably $600-700 million development. There will be residential as well, and even though we have a booming residential construction going on, this will also provide the desperately needed walkable retail that we just don't have too much of. It's really scattered, and that's trying to change here with some of these new developments. But with our sports teams, as well as some of these developers trying to remake the city landscape, I think it's a good combination to drive more traffic downtown.
Yeah, I mean, on that note, something I've been thinking about a lot lately is really Gen Z and the generation after Gen Z. And, we've been very much conditioned for, getting things instantly, right?
Sure.
Amazon's kind of done that to us. So it's like,
Absolutely.
I can click a button and have, a product, the exact product I want at my door, probably the same day in most cases, later that evening or whatever. And so I wonder with Gen Z, if is retail going to, it had a period where it struggled around COVID and everything. And I wonder if it's going to bounce back strong, because I've heard that, the Gen Z demo is very much interested in getting back to in person and actually shopping in person and things of that nature. Do you see some of that as well, as you interact and talk to different, potential tenants or potential buyers of commercial projects?
Yeah, so when it comes to retail, the availability for your neighborhood strip center is relatively low. In most areas, you're talking sub 5% for vacancy. In the type of clientele that's going to those centers, it's really more Amazon resistant or Amazon proof industries. So just talked about nail salon and restaurants. Those are, again, the younger generation is always going to seek in person that community. Even talking about coffee shops, for example, I talked to two younger guys just this morning that they're very successful as real estate developers, gym owners, but they have a concept for a coffee shop. And where they want to go is there actually is a void in that area. But even when I've seen different concepts pop up for this specific niche in the restaurant industry, they've actually done fairly well if they were done executed in the right way. So when it comes to the general retail trends, I think if you are in a good location and there is good co-tenancy, so there is different businesses that would support one another and it's a good mix to drive foot traffic, it's still going to make sense to develop retail in the future as well as the need now.
Okay. Could we dig into that just a little bit? I'm curious
Sure.
on when you talk about like the types of businesses that maybe work well together. What does that mean? Or I guess what would that could that look like?
When I talk about co-tenancy, it's what certain businesses are going to mesh well together to drive traffic to that overall center. So if we have, let's say, a Starbucks on one end and a Qdoba on the other end, and then you have your inline property. So when I say inline, it's not on the end of a property. So we have end caps. So let's say in this example, Starbucks, where there's a drive-through, and then Qdoba's there's a drive-through, or Chipotle. But what is going to be in that center that's going to make sense for that developer or landlord to have? And then when I'm representing a tenant, how am I going to make my case that makes them a good tenant to go there? So these are conversations both I have with the tenant as well as what I have with the landlord rep. So a nail salon, for example, if it's more in a higher end, higher household income area, it's going to make sense to be there with maybe there is Pilates or a high end gym or fitness studio and a high end massage or a wellness clinic, Botox, things like that, that those co-tenants are going to go very well together. So that is always going to be a driver when you're building any of these developments, and it's typical to have that conversation with the landlord rep because they also have these criteria and parameters set. Typically they're telling me this, so I want to make my case, and then those co-tenants, we kind of know which ones should go together.
Yeah. Do you have many business owners come to you and ask or talk through the conversation of, does it make sense for me to lease, or should I actually acquire a property and be my own landlord and maybe rent out some other of the units and things like that? Do you have a lot of those conversations? And if you do, what does that look like? How do you talk to people, talk through the scenario of which would make the most sense?
I've had these conversations with retailers more often with more medical users or office users. But when it does come to retail, I can give you one example off the top of my head where we look at first what is the rental rates in the area, and then what type of construction dollars you're going to put in, how much cash do you have on hand, and what is the typical availability of properties for sale in that area. So it also depends on the square footage. It's one thing to find a 1, 2, maybe 3,000 square foot building that's vacant. It's quite the challenge to find something that's 10 to 20,000 square feet that is vacant. Again, we're buying properties, if you're an investor, to make money. So having 10,000, 20,000 square foot vacant, unless you bought it at an extremely low basis in an appreciating area, you're not going to have that sit long to be vacant. You're going to want to put tenants in there to start making money. So with a ethnic grocer that I've worked with, last year we helped them buy a property where, when we were looking at the 8 to 10,000 square foot spaces, we were doing the math. The math was around $10,000 a month. And typically these landlords were wanting 5 to 10 year terms. Well, we're doing the math. You're talking about close to $1 million on the high end you're going to be spending, and plus your build out of $200,000 to $300,000. Well, you already have cash on hand, maybe not enough to, let's say, go conventional financing, because that's also another component of it. How exactly are you going to do the financing portion? Can you do SBA? Can you do traditional financing? And how long you've been in business? That's going to be greatly influenced on where you can go for that mortgage. We went into a building that was 8,900 square feet. It sat on the market for close to 5.5 years. It also had access land, and looking at the price, right around 550, we already knew with a build out of 400 grand, your amount per square foot would actually be less than the average properties that have sold. So now you're going to have a brand new building, and your payment is going to be less by, a couple $1,000s than if you were actually leasing. So that's the rough part in that example. But typically we're looking at cash on hand, what is the rental rates, and the availability of the property they're actually seeking to potentially buy or lease.
That's a good example of it, because a lot of people will think through, not necessarily our development community, but a lot of people will think through the comparisons of, are you going to rent on the residential side, or are you going to, purchase a home, or are you going to build a home? And then you go on the commercial side, and, I guess there's some similarities and things, but it's not necessarily going to be the exact same reasons why you would do one
Sure.
versus the other. So no, that's super helpful. Do you have a project or a favorite project that you've worked on over the years, or a favorite deal that you could talk through?
Yeah, that would probably be it, because I was able to give these guys equity for one, and they really were just never thinking about that dynamic. There's another property that I just started the project on, where we're trying to take it's a residential home, but it's already commercially zoned. So by right, we can do commercial zoning. So talking to the civil engineer, talking to the architect, and this will be a fun project, is I'm trying to mirror some things I've seen in other states. So this would be, think of a barbecue or a brewery, a destination restaurant, but we're going to take the existing structure, gut it, and then add parking and outdoor seating for this use. Considering what this gentleman got the property at the basis that he has it in, to put the money in the capital and then do a build to suit for a restaurant user. So that will be a fun project to dig into, and just, getting creative. So these guys that have the ethnic grocery store, most likely I will help them build out maybe some additional retail, and that will basically cover close to their mortgage with some of the tenants they already have in the building. So what can I uncover that is not readily obvious to that user or buyer that I'm working with? And that makes it fun to work on these projects.
Awesome. Well, let's looking at the time here at 23 minutes. Let's shift into the last segment here, which is the lightning round. So I've got 5 questions for you,
Okay.
and all of these just kind of related to your experience in the industry and everything. First one for you is, what does a good relationship between a broker and developer look like?
Yeah, so I would say, what's your end goal? So what are we trying to put on this property, and what do we believe that exit's going to look like? So right now, I'm talking to a developer that he may take down some acreage for about 30,000 square feet of retail, and just getting an alignment on what type of tenant relationships do I have that I can bring to the table, and then what is the marketing and really the tools that I can bring out to make this a success. And of course, my faith in that developer, and what they've already done, so I can leverage that to get better tenants to the property. So if I can state that this person's been part of XYZ projects, it just really helps me leverage that reputation of them to make this project a success. So again, I think it's more so the foundation of what am I bringing to the table. I want to bring more value than they're bringing to me. They're the ones that are risking, their financing, what they're bringing to the table, and I want to make sure that I'm bringing that value to the project.
All right, next one here, kind of on the flip side of that. So when developers approach you, about site selection or just a project in general, are there some common like mistakes that they've made prior to getting you involved, or some common maybe incorrect assumptions that they maybe make from time to time?
Yeah. So right now, the grocery store that I'm working with, they're now looking at land, and the biggest thing they want to jump in immediately and talk to the general contractor. So I would say with some of the more new people that are new to development, they're looking ahead when we should be talking to the civil engineer. We're talking about the actual floor area ratio, the area where the building's going to be, and the architect first. And we need to see what are the constraints and what due diligence do we need to spend money on to see if this is a viable project before bringing in your general contractor and any other stakeholder, even talking to that said property owner if it's off the market, or a listing agent if it is.
All right, third one. What do you think the biggest misconception people have about commercial real estate is?
That it's a one size fits all process. So when someone calls me for a space, they think it will be extremely quick. If there is ways where we can concise the time frame, but nothing is going to be quick in this industry unless you're ultimately prepared. So I would say the biggest thing is not being prepared and having not have the general expectations to complete a transaction, whether it's to buy, lease, or sell property.
All right. This next one's kind of related to the other ones, but I'll ask it anyway here. So,
All right.
what's one thing you wish more investors understood before calling you?
Just knowing what they want to accomplish. You know, you want a good deal. Well, what is a good deal to you? Everyone knows, IRR, cash on cash return, equity multiple, cap rate. What are you trying to accomplish with this property, and how is it going to fit into your overall investment thesis? So whether it's just commercial real estate, whether it's stocks, bonds, you own other businesses, how does this fit? And if we buy this property, are you prepared? Are you ready, willing, and able? Do you have the capital to execute? And are you okay with all these other things we're going to spend money on in due diligence? And if it doesn't work out, are you going to be satisfied with that process?
All right, last one here. What's the best piece of real estate advice you've ever received?
Low basis solves everything. So if you buy a property cheap enough, and again, we want to make sure we're hedging our bets, and we're not making mistakes. But if you buy a property cheap enough, there's ways to get out of it. If you buy it too high, there's only so many things you can do on the value add side or management side or leasing side to make it better. If you bought too high, and if you're going to sell the property or try to pull cash out, it may not work for you. So if you buy too low, there's always more exit strategies at your disposal.
With that said, what's the best way for people listening in to connect with you and learn more about your company?
Yeah, so if you want to reach out, find me on LinkedIn, Jumha Shatara. And if you want to give me a call, give me a call at 317-832-2800. But you can also find me at skyrisecre.com and reach out to me there.
Perfect. So those of you listening in, check the show notes page, which you can find down in the description for this episode. On that page, you will find all the links that were just mentioned there, as well as the phone number to reach out to Jumha. And really appreciate you joining and sharing some of your
Likewise.
knowledge about the indie market and also just commercial real estate in general. With that said, we will go ahead and come to a close here. Don't forget, those of you listening in, if you're not already subscribed, click that button. Appreciate having you come back week after week. We've got a lot more good episodes coming up. We will talk to you all next week.
Awesome. Thanks, Ryan.